beautiful clouds?
Those aren't clouds, Daddy. Those are chemtrails.
Chemtrails? What are chemtrails?
Chemical trails, Daddy, and they're very bad.
Put the rumors to rest. Gotta help the children and give it the best can. Stand around and be blind to the frost can. Taking no more, how can we relax that? I look up to the sky. Can you tell me why? Can you tell me why? I don't wanna see you cry. I just wanna see you smile.
Oh wait, now the moon's coming through. Can you hear it, Dane?
Very good.
Human and animal, we are disaster. Right to present opportunity.
Hi, this is Dane Wigington with GeoEngineeringWatch.org radio. Finally back after a couple weeks of being off on other projects. A lot going on, as everybody's probably seeing and hearing. It's getting hard to keep up with the data. In fact, I'm trying to pick the largest things out of the pile as every day goes by, and the walls start to close in faster and faster. I think we talked a little bit a week ago when I was in San Francisco at the March against Monsanto about the fish die-off that's occurring. I want to elaborate on that more today. That should be a giant alarming red flag for people around the globe. Authorities are pretending they don't know what that's about. That's a lie. This is gassing. Much of this is gassing from the seafloor, CH4, which is methane, hydrogen sulfide. It's creating hypoxic and anoxic zones. Hypoxic or low oxygen zones in the water, anoxic zones with almost no oxygen, combined with the warming oceans, which are warming very rapidly. That reduces the amount of oxygen that the oceans can carry, which increases the anoxic zones, and that's the only thing that can cause so many fish in so many places to belly up so quickly. Again, if it was some sort of massive contamination, it would not be uniform around the globe. We would certainly have other indications of what that contamination was. The radiation is a problem, obviously, but it is not the immediate problem that's caused that much fish die-off that quickly. So we'll elaborate on that as we go further into the show. Temperatures in India in the last few days have shattered records. In some regions, pushing 120 degrees with sandstorms instead of monsoon, which is what they should be getting right now. Already considerable mortality from these weather events. Again, these are unprecedented temperature records. So, in conjunction with this, we know we've discussed in a couple previous shows the flooding in Serbia and Bosnia, and people there, the people from those countries, of which I have a few contacts, absolutely believe that this is a result of weather warfare. One scientist from Serbia has spoken out on the record as such. We have now flooding in China, that even the Chinese media, this is interesting, on CCTV, the Chinese news channel, has not elaborated on this flooding so far that has apparently wiped out 25,000 homes. That's quite cataclysmic to not really discuss, and it appears at this point that things are unraveling so quickly that governments and government-sponsored news feeds are not even really discussing the issues. Now we have record flooding in Siberia, again, that's unfolding now. It's expected to worsen in the coming days, and there's already mortalities from this. So the drought deluge cycle will continue, as they aerosolize moisture. It appears that's what's happening in India right now. That's why the monsoon has not developed there. And then other areas are hit with massive record flooding. So people are beginning to wake up. And I had yesterday, I traveled to Sacramento and had 2 presentations near the Capitol. And there were agency people, some at both presentations didn't have the turnout with agency people that we had hoped, because we put out a massive emailing to a lot of the agencies there. But that's still planting seeds with them. The EPA, Fish and Game, and a couple other agencies. We have help from inside these agencies helping us to get the emails to the right people. So the emails did go out, thanks to a lot of help from Russ Tanner. And we had a few of the key people attend the presentations last night, one from Fish and Game. We had some EPA and Cal Air Quality people both attend the full presentation, gather data. Certainly wheels are beginning to turn in a lot of those government entities that have been so silent so far. If we had more people with the courage of Bill Vander Zan, who I was fortunate enough to be on air with this morning, thanks to the efforts of Sylvain Henry, and Bill certainly has brought a lot to the table with his speaking out on the aerosol issue, and he showed tremendous courage, and I hope we find that kind of backbone here with some of the so-called politicians in the state. So far we've seen none, and unfortunately the last news I've gotten from a communication with Lieutenant Governor in California, Gavin Newsom, is that he is succumbing to the pressure of his peers, even though I'm quite certain he saw the validity in the data which I presented to him and his aide 2 months ago. He's doing what so many politicians in our so-called government do, and retreating back into the corner of his comfortable post. So that's very unfortunate indeed. We don't have Russ with us today on audio. I think he's listening, but because Russ is remote right now, he's preparing for an event. I believe, I'm not sure if it's next weekend or after, we have a conference call event involving George Barnes and so forth. So Russ is involved with that, and he wasn't able to get on audio. But we do have Richard Sachs with us today, fortunately, and we can dive into these issues deeper and get some of Richard's insight too. Richard, you with us?
Yeah, I'm still here, Dane. Thanks.
Yeah, glad to have you. I know you're still swamped, Richard, with the ongoing educational adventure that you're immersed in too, with the societal programming mechanism that we have in the U.S., right?
That's part of it. I have probably 5 major projects going on, all of which are full-time, so I'm a little bit time challenged at the moment. It's probably going to stay that way.
Richard, you guys had some warmer temperatures down your way too, correct?
A little bit. Most recently, the most notable thing is an early start of massive fire. And this one looks like it was man-made, but it burned really well because the rain here is also way below normal, and everything's full of nanoparticles of metal, so it really helps it burn. And for the last week or more, it's really looked like a bad day in downtown Los Angeles with totally brown, opaque air.
It's funny you mention that, because in Sacramento yesterday it looked exactly the same. I mean, it was the most hideous-looking sky, with a very, very dirty, dingy, industrial-looking. The air is very staticky. It's clearly not right. I don't know what that's about. You hear that? I'm not sure what that ring is about. Richard, did you hear that?
Yeah, I did. Hopefully Russ will be able to take care of it.
Okay. Anyway,
I'm on with you now.
Hey, Russ.
Hey, good to have you. Sorry, I'm at the remote location helping Liz and Jan set up for the upcoming event that they're having here.
Outstanding. Good to have you back.
Hi, Dane. Hi,
hey.
Richard.
Hey, how are you? How are you?
Elizabeth and Jan.
How are you guys? Well, hey, glad to have you with us again, Russ. And what we were discussing before you got on, Russ, not sure you heard, but Richard described the air in his region, a very dirty, dingy industrial color. Saw the same thing in Sacramento yesterday, and there was no major dust storms or anything. This is simply a fallout from whatever they're spraying. And the air has a very lifeless feel to it when it's like that. Richard, have you noted that? I mean, there's no moisture in it per se. It feels statically. It feels charged.
Yeah, to me, it's probably a combination of a lot of things, ionization and other things like that, but it's the opposite of the freshness that you're normally supposed to feel.
Yeah, it doesn't feel right at all. And another event this last week that got some attention, I posted some data on the Great Lakes still had ice. And this is the latest recorded date that they had ice that was visible from satellite imagery. And what was even more astounding is the temperatures near the lake shore were 85 degrees, an all-time record high. We just had the warmest April on record. We had lake temperatures far above freezing. I checked. So why is there ice on those lakes? And again, a lot of people that covered the ice didn't bother to mention the 85-degree temperatures, the all-time record highs, didn't bother to mention the fact that the water was far above freezing, and didn't bother to ask, why is there ice?
Yeah, Dane, I think one of the first suspicions that everybody should have about that is, what is it? Frozen something, but probably not frozen pure water, and it could be highly toxic. Very, very well stated, and that's exactly my point. And certainly, as I've described in previous shows, we've had the same thing here in this winter especially. We had pond water here that was pushing 40 degrees, nighttime lows of 40 degrees, and daytime highs in the 60s. We had ice, and we know that there were chemical nucleating agents in that ice because we tested that ice, and those elements were there. The ice here remained for about 2 weeks like that, and it was so, the chemical reaction was so powerful that it was actually gassing the water out of the pond, even with a coating of ice on it. And the pond level dropped precipitously over that time frame, and that's what we would expect with something that chemically reacts that strong. So, again, I know there's a lot of anomalies happening out there, and it's just important for people to remember that this stuff is not natural, that what's happening and so much of what we're seeing is completely unnatural. And back to I want to go over the bird die-offs, which are now following, by the way, the fish die-offs. I don't know if you might have seen anything on that, Richard, the story from a couple of days back now, getting ready to post on this, that now that the birds are dropping out of the sky along the coast as well. Well, whatever killed the fish could also, in theory, kill a lot of these seabirds. If you have gassing from the seafloor, as I just described, CH4, which is methane, hydrogen sulfide, anybody who's been to the coast sees the birds float around the surface a lot, in groups generally. And if there was a large gassing event underneath that group, and especially if it contained hydrogen sulfide, that would indeed kill birds that would wash up on the shore perhaps a couple of days later, and that's what seems to be happening. So this should be headlines on papers around the globe. And as you said so many times, Richard, as you said correctly, that's a very cut and dried situation. Is the ocean's warm? It's the only thing that can thaw the methane. I mean, that pretty much puts an end to any waste of further time on the details of whether it's getting warmer or colder. But I have 2 points to make on that. First of all, on the fish die-off, a friend of mine in Iran said recently every fish in a large lake in Iran where there's a lot of spraying, cutting off all the incoming rainstorms and trying apparently to kill the people and the life forms there with no water. Every fish in this one lake near where he lives died at once. And the next day there are no fish left at all. And the other point I wanted to make is that I believe at some point when strategy changes, all of this climate chaos is going to be exposed on every major news station at once. And when it happens, we should not rejoice, because the only thing that's going to make this of any value to us at all is if it's connected to geoengineering, and every form of geoengineering is stopped. And I can tell you from my own contacts right now and over many years, since the 1960s when I started studying what is now called geoengineering and the climate changes that were coming, they're going to use the total awareness of climate chaos to say we need more geoengineering, and they're already preparing thousands of programs in universities all over the world to make careers out of this, and they're going to enforce the violent aspects of Agenda 21. That's exactly where this is going. And so if we make the point successfully that the climate is being destroyed, we better make extra sure that there's no doubt about why, that it's not because we need more controlled living conditions via Agenda 21, and it's not because we need geoengineering.
Certainly all your points are accurate in the amount of control they exercise over the universities, because that's where the funding is, that's where the promise of jobs are for some of these people, so they abandon their morality and jump on board. They'll toe the line, and this is how the universities have been so successfully hijacked. And
right, and globally too. It's not just U.S. at all. This is all over most of the world. And as far as people that are saying, well, it's just the U.S. and NATO countries that are being bad, and there's several other ones that are really going to be good, they're looking at the puppets on different hands of the same puppet master. And if they ever want to understand that, just look at the countries that are controlled by the central banks that are all under the Bank of International Settlements, and you'll stop any kind of misunderstanding that there are these different sides fighting each other. It's just a puppet show.
It's a puppet show that's successful in many ways, though unfortunately too many people buy it. Even the imagined division in our government and all these little skirmishes that happen between the left, the right, so many people still buy into that facade. And
right. And you know, now on a bigger scale, Putin is being allowed in Russia to do many really good things because it's intended in the puppet show to transfer large amounts of the wealth of the world from west to east. However, he has to follow his directions as well. And if you look up the central bank in Russia, you'll see it's a member of the Bank of International Settlements. They have exactly one ruler running the whole show.
I'm not sure I see it that way, you know, and you may be right, but I'm not sure that there's not lots of division in the power structure, and that it's like mafia families, that no matter how much cohesion they have when there's plenty to go around, once there's not, there's infighting, and certainly there's collusion. I don't argue that. When I have photographs that I found, we posted on GeoWatch, of Soviet weather modification scientists touring the U.S., 1968, height of the Cold War. Clearly collusion right now. Obviously that China and Russia are heavily involved in climate engineering. Nobody's exposing the other.
I mean, if they had any interest in helping their people in the long run for real, they would never allow those planes to fly for 1 minute over their countries.
Oh, I don't think they have any interest in helping the people. I'm not insinuating that, but I'm insinuating I think that, like any criminal cabal, everybody's out for their own interest ultimately, and a lot of these are the division between Russia, China, and the Western powers, I think, is real. And
I think it's real on their level. What I'm saying is that you have another level of the structure that doesn't exist in the mafia families you mentioned. And that level is the central banking, and it's absolutely, totally controlled from one point. And, you know, they allow a certain amount of animosity between different factions because it you know, promotes exactly the illusion that you're talking about, which is that they're really against each other. But if they ever went against the global agenda, they would be finished.
Well, certainly we have historical fact that would back up a lot of what you're saying. I mean, we had in World War II, we know we had Prescott Bush, George W. Bush's grandfather, that helped fund the Nazi Germany side of the war. It's historical fact. Wow. There was even congressional hearings on this, so you know that certainly in that case is true. With the situation that's happening now, I'm not sure that's the case. And again, you may be right, but at this point, there's ample signs that there may be a significant division in the power structure at this point, and from several factions, China, Russia, and the NATO powers being the primary players. And as things start to disintegrate, which we have now, Libya is absolutely disintegrating. There's chaos ensuing in, again, about 36 countries around the globe right now. You're starting to see things even in places like Brazil, where the World Cup is starting to go. The resource situation is getting very, very bleak very quickly, and the climate situation as well. And if what's happening in India right now, again, if they're blocking the monsoon, adding to the heat, which they definitely are doing here. As I went south yesterday on I-5, the main corridor through California, and to look at the orchards, it's just astounding how bad they look. I've mentioned this before, but they look horrific. I mean, there's orchards that have actually been torn out, mature orchards. And I saw yesterday something I haven't seen before. Huge shaded areas of farm fields where they're apparently trying to get the smaller plants to grow and sprout. Now, this is new, and the UV here is so incredibly intense, getting worse by the day. I mean, you don't even want to go outside around here. It's that bad. And in San Francisco, my forehead and part of my scalp got pretty severely sunburnt. I don't burn easy. I don't burn easy at all, and it was astoundingly intense sunlight, and the trees in San Francisco looked very bad. In fact, right in the middle of town where they're shaded, and again, my dad was an arborist. I know trees. I've been around it my whole life, and the trees had about half their usual foliage, lots of dead branches sticking out everywhere, and that's a glaring sign of a tree trying to reduce its exposure to UV. And
also to evaporation, Dane. If they don't have nearly enough water, they have to drop leaves and, if necessary, branches. I mean, even if you just don't.
These trees are being irrigated. They're right in the middle of town. So the water would not be an issue with these trees, and we go back to the UV, and also that intense UV causes the trees to close their stomata, their respiratory pores, and that reduces their respiration as well. And so we're not seeing trees grow really at all. I mean, the ones that are managing to stay alive look bad, but we're not really seeing any growth at all. So I don't know how long that can continue, especially with the orchards and so forth, when the trees themselves are not going to produce like that. We're hearing from everybody. I talked to people yesterday at my presentations from UC Davis who are having tremendous trouble growing a lot of things. Tomatoes was one thing they brought up specifically, and the UV issue is new to them, but these are things that can't be hidden a whole lot longer. And when we have fish going belly up all over the globe, and even just a few weeks' time, dozens of places, that's just something that can't be hidden for a whole long time. Russ, did you follow the fish situation too? Yes.
Yeah, certainly. Certainly, I've seen that going on. Of course, this has been going on for years. Many different.
You're correct. It has. It's just accelerating right now.
Yeah, it's really out of control. It is accelerating, and I can tell you, as someone I frequently mention on the show, that I can smell and taste this stuff in the air. As the plumes descend on us, it gets very, very intense, and as they dissipate, it slowly dissipates. And I can attest to anyone who has any doubt who's listening that I have never in my life experienced anything like this metallic chemical taste in the air that we get day after day after day. I can only imagine what the wildlife is suffering through.
Well, you said it's worse. When you moved from Maine to where you're at now, it was not quite as bad as it's become, right? I mean, it's getting worse rapidly where you're at too, correct?
Yeah, where I was outside Bangor, Maine, it was absolutely unbearable. And this started, I guess, about a little less than a year ago, maybe 8 months ago or so. The intensity really increased, and I got feedback from people all over the world that the intensity increased all over the world at the same time. And here in Philadelphia, it's significantly milder. It's not mild by any stretch of the imagination. Day after day, it still looks like a war zone here, and the air is bad, but it is significantly milder than the Bangor area. Now, there is an Air Force base in National Guard in Bangor. I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but it definitely is not quite as bad here in Philadelphia. Still bad, though.
I spoke to Rima LeBeau. I was on her show for 2 hours Thursday night in Chile, and I think, Richard, you've recently communicated with Rima too, haven't you?
Yeah, that's how I knew about your show, and also I've communicated with other people that we talk about Chile, and they're starting. This is an example. Well, I should let you finish your point first. I've got two things to respond to that with.
Well, I was just going to, and you can elaborate on this. Rima expressed that they are getting absolutely hammered down there, and she's, I know, a very strong, healthy woman, and she made very clear the fact that she felt very fatigued, almost like a chronic fatigue type syndrome that she's never felt before. And is that related to the spraying? It seems certainly very plausible, if not probable. And but she said the skies there were absolutely horrific.
I agree. I was going to make 2 points, two or three quick in succession here. One of them is that with respect to what I said about all these major countries being unified under global control, I believe that's true, but and exceptions like Libya, which wasn't before and was planning its own independent banking system, which is really the sign of separation. That's one of the main reasons they were invaded and destroyed by NATO and U.S. forces. However, I do see major signs of split, not between those rulers of the countries in reality, but in the lower segments. For example, in the U.S., millions of people in the military and other portions of government are just, beginning or pretty far along realizing that with all their great ideals and motives for being there, they're being used to create absolute destruction. And that really is hopeful for us when they realize that, and the military, the police, and other people in different parts of society realize that they don't want to work for the power structure. And all kinds of possibilities come up then. With respect to Chile, Chile also appeared for a while and has been promoted by several sites to be a great alternative to hanging around the U.S. while controlled demolition goes on here with the economy and other things, because their economy was allowed to do pretty well, and there was a lot more freedom there temporarily than there was in the U.S. in many ways. Now, the agenda is changing. They're reaching a point where they're starting to let inflation run, and at the same time, interestingly enough, they're coming in much more heavily with the spraying to destroy the natural environment, and you can just see these things playing out. They go back and forth, and the movements are according to the orchestrated plan, but any country that the top rulership of which is genuinely not in the system, they get invaded and destroyed, as we've watched happen very many times recently.
While this is all unfolding, again, there's things that I don't know that you could even term as controlled chaos. As the climate system unravels, as climate engineering continues to fuel that unraveling, there's really no handle that the power structure has on that. Yes, they're turning these levers and increasing the chaos, but certainly couldn't call it controlled, not in my opinion. So when we have a couple of recent fun facts also that are now out, it looks like we just had the warmest April on record globally. We might have the warmest May on record. The UK has just had the third warmest spring on record. And let me read a little headline from India right now. I'm reading directly off the article. This is a few hours old. Hot dust, a dust storm rolls through New Delhi on Friday amidst furnace-like 113-degree heat-snarling traffic and resulting in the tragic loss of 9 more lives. And it shows a picture that looks like some sort of an art picture out of an apocalyptic movie. The sky is it's full of dust. Today, the heat wave continued to gain ground with Kota and Rajasthan reaching all-time records of 116 degrees. New Delhi's mercury hit 113 degrees, another record-shattering high of drought-induced dust storm. Dust shrouding the city spurred traffic chaos. In heat, darkness, and confusion, 9 more souls were lost. After 2 months of growing disruption due to heat and drought, the lands of peoples of India cry for a monsoon that is running later and later with each new weather report. They can shut that rain off as long as they want. This is the same as we were facing in California right now. We have blanket spraying still going on off the coast, massive high-pressure domes. So as the walls close in, and part of what I presented yesterday in the two presentations I did in Sacramento, the moles, that's the term given to these underground tunnel boring machines that are part of the DUMS, and that's the perfect acronym, the Deep Underground Military Bases. So as the climate is continuing to disintegrate, as the climate engineering is continuing to fuel that disintegration, the military-industrial complex is literally digging in. And if anybody hasn't seen pictures of these moles, they're so massive. Richard or Russ, have you seen pictures of some of the largest tunnel boring machines called moles?
I've seen them. They're huge. They're very, very large. Several stories high.
They can actually turn the walls of those tunnels into kind of a glass-like material, and they're all over the place.
I've seen some of that technology that or at least talked about. I don't know. I haven't seen the really hard data on that yet, but I know what you're talking about, Richard. That they are supposed to have the technology to be able to take the spoils, the material that's being burrowed out, and to more or less glaze it onto the walls, and so they don't have this byproduct to deal with. But I haven't seen anything that is a hard confirmation of that, but it perhaps exists, and certainly they have the moles. And if I'll post a presentation on this with photos in the coming week, perhaps. And what some of these machines are as high as 50 feet, and try to really comprehend that it doesn't look real. It absolutely doesn't look real that this massive machine could even function. So this is what the power structure is doing right now, while they're wreaking havoc on the surface of the globe. And we have wheels now that they're turning that can't be shut off. We have increasing cataclysms from what I just described in India to now record floods in Siberia, Bosnia, Serbia. Slovenia got wiped out with the ice storms recently. We have record floods in China. There's no way to hide this too much longer, and society begins to break down. And I would argue it's breaking down right now. It cannot sustain this constant onslaught from every direction. You have an economic system that's completely breaking down. That you have, perhaps, I spoke to a financial person yesterday that's quite in the know on what the total derivatives market are, and a lot of people don't know what derivatives are. They're nothing, basically. It's just a bet. And this is what the wealth of the country is based on. Largely, it's based on derivatives. And the estimated value of derivatives right now is about perhaps as high as 2 quadrillion. It's very hard to get your arms around numbers that big, 2 quadrillion. And this is why they're keeping the stock market pumped up in spite of absolutely bad news on every front, in spite of the major car companies, as we discussed formerly. They're literally buying their own cars, and when they don't sell, they're parking them in these massive parking lots. We posted an article on this. In spite of all this, in spite of job cuts, job losses, everything, the stock market is just levitating at all-time record highs. And this is the only way they can hide what's happening right now, because if there was any reality to the stock market value, people of the globe would know that this is the end of the road for the paradigm that's been. So they're simply trying to hide it as long as possible. Richard, have you heard numbers that high for the derivatives up to?
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate, and it's a really brilliant and sophisticated Ponzi scheme that transfers the wealth away from the people into debt and gives it to these banks. And when the banks make these bets and they fail, and the governments bail them out, that means the government gives the debt to the people. And that's what, makes the situation where in Iceland, this is why they arrested their bankers, but it hasn't gotten popular and it's not covered in the news. This is all intentionally being done, and it's been a plan that's been in motion for at least 100 years that is in the end game now. And part of the idea is that when the country goes bankrupt, the people who are starving will beg for global control to save them. And the theme is that what they want to do to us, they want us to request rather than have it done by force.
Not only is that exactly true, but that's why you've seen these stories about using the Soviet Union to expose 9/11, and I believe what they're doing, that's part of the long-term plan, is to glorify communism. That's going to make the New World Order more palatable. Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly right, Ross. I totally agree with that. And it doesn't matter if you call it communism, fascism.
The communism part, Russ, I'm trying to clarify on that, because certainly what we see happening here would be defined as fascism. And
right. What I was about to say, Dane, is that whether you call it communism or fascism or even democracy, which leads right into tyranny, the real issue there is not which one it is, but whether it's total control or total freedom or anything in between. And that's the actual spectrum that you're not supposed to look at.
Well, Dane, I totally agree. It is fascism. It is fascism, but the people don't know that. The people are going to want communism. They're going to want a socialistic type of control. In at least they're trying to move people in that direction, but the people are never really allowed to understand that it really is fascism. So I do agree.
Yeah. It's just harder to make fascism look palatable. Communism, if people are really dumb, they can think it's something attractive.
Well, I mean, I hear a lot of the big radio show hosts, I don't know if it was Glenn Beck or some of the others, I've heard it on Fox News, that they'll repeatedly use the wrong term for what is really would be a dictionary definition of what is going on. They repeatedly do this. The public doesn't understand the terms. They'll accept those terms and not really know the difference. So we see a lot of that going on. And I would argue that whatever plans they have are not going to reach fruition because the whole system is absolutely imploding. It's the life support systems, and we talk about taking the wealth of the people. The only true wealth lies in natural resources. The rest is simply artificial wealth. And when we have numbers like 2 quadrillion, 2,000 trillion dollars, that doesn't exist in any real tangible form. It's simply smoke and mirrors and numbers on a computer or a page. And the real wealth, again, is in the environment, and that is imploding by the day. It's imploding from, I just read that the shellfish harvests are going to cost, or the losses are going to be in the tens of billions of dollars. They're dying everywhere. The ocean's acidifying again by the day. Fish harvests are going through the basement. We have resource wars in this case fishing. We have all the territorial disputes happening right now in Japan and Vietnam and with China and so forth. I mean, they're all trying to scrape up the last few fish that are still managed to survive the onslaught in the oceans. And what we have is the walls closing in at absolutely blinding speed. Harvest dropping through the basement. What's going on in India right now? What's that going to do to harvest? 116 degrees with dust storms when it should be monsoon rains. That's a pretty big contrast. We're starting to get a planet that doesn't much resemble the planet Earth that we've known, right? I mean, when you picture places that are in jungled areas with 116 degrees and that kind of dust and wind, and you get it's called the wet bulb effect. And this is a rather strange term, but what the scientific term means is that you reach a point of temperature and humidity that has never before been seen on planet Earth. It happened in China several times last year. They had temperatures of 110 degrees and humidities over 50%. Normally, when you reach temperatures that high, the humidity drops way down. Human body can't take that combination, and that's where in terms of what's called the wet bulb effect. So when you reach that threshold point, people start to die quickly, and we're heading for probably many instances of that this year. So that's going to be interesting. Have you ever heard that term before, Richard or Russ? It's kind of an unorthodox term.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it, and we had a few instances of it last summer. And, it looks to me, just stepping back on the whole thing, that all of these approaching ways of mass death occurring are exactly what's intended to happen, and they're just moving in the direction that they want to. But I think there are also some positive, solution-oriented things happening. Certainly all the exposure that you're doing to all these government agencies and other groups everywhere, Dane. And I noticed in Arizona there's a site, a fairly new site, stopsprayingaz.org, which is actually, so they're fairly new, but they're already getting people together to go meet with government officials, and they're getting a lot of credibility, and some of these officials within government that would like to not be serving the monstrous machine are actually coming over and wanting to help them. The other one that I see that's very hopeful, because we don't, get a chance to really look at anything very hopeful very much, is the incredible work that's being done at itccs.org. And this is bringing charges against people in very high positions in government and corporations, speaking of fascism, that is actually starting to have massive effect. And they're training sheriffs now for enforcement of convictions that they've already got. And they've got major things happening. And they say right up front that this could be applied to any major problem where we have a evil power structure intentionally enforcing these things against humanity and against the biosphere, and the spraying is a perfect example of that. It's not a technical problem first, it's a problem that the people in charge don't have our benefit in mind, and that's where all this is coming from.
Oh, I don't think there's any doubt they've never had the benefit of the common man in mind. The part that I think is becoming ever more clear is that they, at this point, have torpedoed their own ship as well. And again, whatever they had planned, however deep their holes, however well stocked, we stay on this course, this current trajectory, and they will go down with us.
They're not realizing that. The ones below the very top are not realizing that yet. They're still willing to bet on their membership in these special clubs that'll be living underground while they wipe out life on the surface, but they're going to find out it was a really bad decision in the end, and that's not going to help us, though.
You know, on that point, Richard, and I agree with you, certainly law enforcement. When we see law enforcement in every country willing to billy club, beat, spray, tear gas their own population, that's that mentality there as well, isn't it? I mean, that those in law enforcement, by and large, feel if they carry out their orders, somehow they'll be on the inside. Somehow.
Well, there are still really great people scattered in law enforcement, some wonderful ones that I know, but more and more the agencies which are being trained for this by the federal government specifically to hire people of limited intelligence who really like beating people up and shooting people, and they're getting to the point, such as in Albuquerque, New Mexico Police Department, where they're actually training people to shoot very early in a confrontation and find out the details later. And they're hiring people who will go along with that, and as the instructors that will not teach that psychology quit, they're hiring ones that like it. So, yeah, this mentality is being looked for, people that really get excited about driving a tank around their local town as if it's going to fight crime. They're getting them all ready to fight against the American people, and this is going to be happening not just in this country but elsewhere as well.
You know, on that note, you saw the film probably of the Albuquerque police, whacking that homeless guy.
Yeah.
You probably saw that, which was absolutely astounding. And I saw another piece that there was an applicant for the NYPD, New York Police Department, who, in the end, it appeared he was denied his potential for employment there because his IQ was too high.
That's the common theme that is being taught by the federal government to change the local police forces.
Yeah, that's astounding and alarming at the same time. And this guy seemed like a good, rational guy, but he scored over 125 for his IQ, and that got him cut.
Right. Yeah, that's just a little exposure of what's happening all over the country.
Yeah, we see the stakes going up in Ukraine by the day. The U.S. now has the majority of its naval fleet in Japan. There's territorial disputes going on there, and no matter what happens, as we see again, the economic situation is completely unsustainable. Ultimately, it all boils down to resources. Those resources are waning from every direction. So, no matter how much money is printed, I would think that we're quite close to hitting the wall in many ways, and certainly we need to use the time wisely between now and when things might get very different to try to get the word out, change the flavor of what we face. The CIA, former CIA, that I have contacted recently, I think I've mentioned his name before, Jim Caro, and I want to get him on the show here pretty quick. I think we're going to be able to. But he felt, and certainly he seems to be, would seem he's in a position to know, that we might have perhaps till fall before things may get very different. So, Jim doesn't have a crystal ball. I don't have a crystal ball. And this is not anything that anybody claims to know for certainty, but if you look at trajectories, if you have a plane heading at the ground at maybe a 80-degree angle and it's traveling at a specified speed and it's a certain distance from hitting, you can say with reasonable certainty how long that's going to take before that impact occurs. And I think that's the sort of situation we face when you have so many things converging at once. And James Kunstler, have you heard of Kunstler, Russ or Richard?
Yeah.
Kunstler coined that term, converging catastrophes. And I certainly think that's what we have coming together right now. That being said, people should consider how much difference they can make. This is a point I tried to make yesterday in the presentations, and I try always to, but every single person listening, everybody who cares about this cause, the climate engineering cause, any one of them could be the critical, pivotal last grain of sand that any one of all of us to help tilt that scale in the right direction, to help bring the single biggest elephant in the room to light, the climate engineering. I mean, can you imagine the shockwave around the globe? This discussion came up last night. In fact, I met a couple of people who work for Bechtel Power Corporation, and they were familiar with the project I work on for Bechtel from 30 years ago. They've been with the company that long. But we had this discussion that if we really got this out in the open, at the degree of anger that would be felt by the common man who has been impacted by this one way or another, where it's their own personal health, their own respiratory system, their children's autism or asthma, or their parents' Alzheimer's, the population, I believe, would be absolutely livid. That would be the pitchfork and torch moment. Don't you feel? I mean, if it was really out there, really known, hey, we've been spraying you for 6 decades, and at a point where it can't be denied, I don't think they're going to make that pig fly. I don't see how they can. There's been enough seeds sown, and this is part of the goal, part of our awareness-raising goal for all of us, I think. We've sown enough seeds now that enough people know about these programs that I think it's going to be a damn hard sell, no matter how they try to pitch it.
Yeah, I think the people are getting closer and closer to becoming aware of a lot of these things at an accelerating rate. And the question is, what's going to play out after the awareness gets higher? And you can tell the power structures idea is that what's going to happen is at least in America, is a massive civil war. And that's what they're getting ready for. And that's the whole purpose of Homeland Security, is to fight that war against the American people. But it doesn't have to go that way. If that awareness goes together with a higher, character level, that's really where the center of the decision making is going to come from, or the determination of which way things will go. Because as I said before, just the awareness, for example, that the climate is about to kill humanity is not going to be anything like enough to give us a good outcome. It has to be, okay, then what do you do after that? And the power structure wants to have its answer ready of what to do after that, and it's going to be move everybody into these special living units under total surveillance and control your food, control your mind, and everything else. But that doesn't have to be the response. So along with the awareness of the worsening global problems needs to become some beginning awareness that this is all about character, consciousness, awareness, clarity, what condition you bring yourself into, your physical body and your mind, and your general level of consciousness. Because without that, the response to awareness of the problems is going to be like the low IQ police.
I would argue they're not going to be able to carry out those plans. I don't argue that that's on the agenda, but I think as the system implodes to the degree that it's going to implode, that those in the ranks that are slated to carry out those plans will be trying to figure out how they're going to get their families fed, their next bite of food, keep their head above the waterline. I'm looking at another headline right now. This is new. It's a day old. Dust in the wind. Dust bowl conditions have returned to Kansas, Oklahoma, and North America and Texas. So everywhere we see the lack of food production, or the diminishing food production, is increasing. This is going to hit everybody in the shelf, and in the pocketbook, or the market shelf, in their wallet pretty quick. And these headlines keep stacking up. While they talk about the most ridiculous things imaginable on the so-called corporate media, it is astounding. And RTTV is getting much more aggressive with I just posted a segment from their show exposing the past U.S. false flag events. What Turkey just said, I don't know if Russ or Richard, did you guys see the phone recording of the Turkish officials planning a false flag event in Syria?
Yeah, attacking themselves. Saw that one.
Correct. Russ, did you happen to see that?
I heard about it, yep.
Yeah, astounding. I mean, it couldn't be more blatant and glaring. So this is starting to leak out everywhere, and you're having more and more of the true picture revealed. And the population right now, there's riots in Turkey today over this and other issues. So we see this sort of societal unrest. It's ramping up. It must ramp up when you have, again, not enough food, not enough water, total government tyranny. And at a certain point in time, where does this absolute spinelessness, I can't describe it any other way, of so many government employees, that I don't say all, I truly don't say all. I met with some very, very honorable government employees yesterday, but they're having to sneak around, literally, in the shadows. That emails and so forth, things that we send out, we have to do it. We have to make sure that nothing's tied to them, or they'll be terminated certainly, probably quickly. And because the majority, even of their peers, are absolutely spineless and willing to toe the line and do whatever they're told, and that's not okay. And I hope that when things get brought to light, I believe that society will not look at that as an excuse that, well, I was just doing my job. That doesn't get it. When you have this, you guys both remember the law enforcement officer that was spraying the students in a university in California in the face at the Occupy event. It was maybe 18 months ago. Do you remember seeing that? He's just walking along, spraying them in the face. They're all sitting down.
Yeah.
And things like that are absolutely inexcusable. And it doesn't matter if you're wearing a badge or not. And society needs to start holding people like that accountable. Not that just they have a paid leave for a month. That's not a penalty. So it's...
right along the lines of what Richard was saying, I mean, we have a mentality, not among everybody, there's a lot of awareness coming up, a lot of people are coming to a point of awareness, but part of the problem is so many people are so selfish-oriented that unless they understand that this is personally affecting them, that their health issues in their day-to-day life are being affected, they just don't get motivated. So I think that may be one useful point to bring out to try to motivate people, is how this is affecting them personally.
Rush, your point is it's so accurate, and that's selfishness right now, where people don't want to do a damn thing for the common good. They simply want to pursue their own pleasures and their own activities while the ship goes down, and not until the water line's up around their neck do they start to respond, and by then it's too late. So, I hope that sense of responsibility kicks in for certain people, and saw a lot of that responsible people last night at this presentation. Again, people that went to great lengths, drove great distances to come out, but we don't see that a lot. And I know in my own personal surroundings with people, and I hear this from so many activists, they're frustrated, their families, their friends, everybody's disowning them, and I encourage them to keep on, because those people that are behaving in that manner will be shocked into awakening soon. It's happening now. The media, there's so many headlines being suppressed right now, it's astounding, absolutely astounding. And the stories that are being covered are absolutely ridiculous. So I hope everybody perseveres and keeps on, because vindication, and it's a tough way to get vindication when you're talking about this kind of collapse. But that vindication is coming. It's a step that has to happen. It has to get worse before it gets better in this case, because there's so many that are exactly as Russ described. Exactly. So, but I would argue again that vindication is coming. Go ahead.
Dane, along the lines of solutions, I'm like I said at the beginning of the show, I'm here. The reason we had a little technical difficulties is because I'm running the show remotely. I'm here in New Jersey today, helping with a technical setup of an event coming up. And how would you feel if we could we plug that event a little bit and give people an example of what everybody can do? I mean, anybody can do this if they're willing to put in the work, and it is worth it. It's that important.
Yeah, we do need to plug that. In fact, give me more details, because you're right there with Liz and Jan, and you can give me more details on that. And they've both done a tremendous amount, been very, very tireless in all their work and efforts. Yeah. And in spite of hitting the wall with a lot of uncooperative government officials, they're undeterred and they keep moving forward. And I salute them for that. So give us some more details.
Yeah, they're amazing. I've been here spending part of the day with them, helping with the technical details of this upcoming event. Why don't I let Jan and Liz tell the story a little bit about what they're doing and what people can do, if that's okay. They're sitting here here next to me. Why don't you tell us, Liz, about your event?
Yes. Hi, everybody. We have the event coming up. It's going to be on Saturday, June 21st, from 12 to 3. And we have a wonderful special guest speaker panel featuring Dane Wigington, George Barnes, Dr. Doug Levine, Russ Tanner, and Richard Sachs, which we're very excited about. It's going to be awesome. And what we're doing here, it's going to be a theater, and we're going to show the film, the award-winning film, Look Up. And after the film, we are going to have the guest speaker panel, and they'll be there to answer any questions anybody will have and any comments. And we're trying to raise awareness in central New Jersey so we can hopefully go further and be able to get something that we would really like, and hopefully maybe one day a billboard.
Yes, raising money for Billboard. This is already happening. What these women are doing here is phenomenal. They're working very, very hard in raising awareness, and they are making a lot of inroads. And people can do this if they're willing to work and do this. So, what was the date on that one more time?
Saturday, June 21st, from 12 to 3.
And that's at the Playhouse 22 in East Brunswick, New Jersey, at the East Brunswick Community Arts Center. So I hope everybody in the area will attend.
I hope so too. And Elizabeth, you guys have had some of the scheduled meetings more or less cancel out, right? I mean, a couple of these officials that were going to meet.
Yes, and we even had an attorney tell us that was willing to listen, and all of a sudden, he's like, "Nope, you're not going to get anybody to help," and the government, blah blah blah. But you know what? Eventually, we will be heard. We just believe in continuing to try and work hard at this, and we're very involved in many aspects of this awareness, which is not just contacting the Congress people and government officials, but everybody as a whole. And I had a very good experience the other day where a gentleman who worked in a store, I had heard something at work through the grapevine about him realizing about these horrible chemicals being sprayed in the air, and I stopped by, and he has a store that's very busy, and I dropped off a ton of flyers, and he had a flyer there, Dane, and it had GeoEngineeringWatch.org, and I was very impressed.
Yeah, and it turns out this person, we're finding there are a lot of people who know about this who aren't maybe speaking out, but they're becoming more bold as they realize that everybody else is kind of thinking the same thing. So this is a good sign.
Once they know they're not alone, and that's really important for people they're starting to realize that there's a whole lot more of us than meets the eye at times, and I think the undercurrent of awareness is much larger still. So, I salute the effort from both of you, Elizabeth and Jan, and I hope people take notice of what you're doing and keep maybe pin an article here or there about all the different things you guys have done, how you've done it, and it's important for people to understand that you can have that kind of effect when you just simply don't give up. When the first appointment is canceled, you don't just walk away and throw in the towel. You keep going, and you keep track of those who cancel as well. In fact, perhaps we can use the disinformation directory that now Doug Diamond, he's in Memphis, is helping with that site. Russ is helping with that site. Kathleen Gable's helping with that, or actually Corey from Arizona, Corey Gunnels is helping with that site. So there's a few people working on that. So when you get a cancellation, Elizabeth and Jan, from one of these people that simply wants to ignore the issue or sweep it under the rug, perhaps you two might want to get involved with that site so we can expose those people and start to put them out there for the public to feed on, put their emails out so everybody can rattle their cage and start putting the spotlight on those that are not only not doing their part, but actually helping the collective insanity to hide these crimes. So, that's one more avenue.
Because we can't look at this passivity as something that is acceptable. We're talking about a crime against humanity, and these people who turn a blind eye who are in government, there's really no excuse for it.
They're accessories to the crime at this point, and they need to be seen as such. So, Elizabeth, Jan, you guys have an open invite to participate in the disinformation directory with Doug if anytime you want, and start posting some of these people. So, I welcome participation in that site to help admin it. And the more these types of people don't like to be exposed, they absolutely don't. We've seen that with David Keith. We've seen that with Ken Caldera. Emails I had with Ken Caldera sometime back, he was absolutely completely beside himself with angst at being exposed for some of the things he said and so forth. So that kind of spotlight's a good thing. Richard, any last comments? We're about to wrap up.
Really quickly, I'll support you by saying that the government serves those whom they fear. If they fear their bosses, they're going to serve them, and if they fear the people, they will serve them. Richard?
Yeah, it's too bad that's the way it works, but I completely agree with you. I want to thank Liz and Jan for everything that you guys are doing, and I would encourage everybody to put government officials who give disinformation on that site along with the other people that are there.
Well said, Richard.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks to Liz and Jan for all they're doing here in New Jersey. Visit their event. We're going to have that all over our Facebook group. This is Russ Tanner on behalf of GeoEngineeringWatch.org radio. Join us every Saturday at 12 noon. Eastern Time at ucy.tv.